Okay, 9.4, day 1, we're going to graph the basic sine and cosine graphs. To graph it, I normally use the unit circle, and you don't have to have the whole thing memorized, but if you know the basic 4 corners, we can get a good graph here. So for the corners of the unit circle, what do we know? We know this is 0, this is pi over 2, this is pi, this is 3 pi over 2. Okay, I picked those corners because I know they're ordered pairs, because this is the unit circle from 0, 0. I go right 1, so this is 1, 0, 0, 0. I go up 1, so it's 0, 1. I go left 1, negative 1, 0. I go down 1, so this is 0, negative 1. Okay, and I can normally get a good graph just using these 4 points. Okay, if I'm graphing the sine function, I'm looking at the y value of each of these ordered pairs. So the sine of 0 is 0. So on my graph where x is 0, I'm going to put a dot at 0. Okay, the next good spot for sine is pi over 2. The sine of pi over 2 is 1. Now if I look at my graph, I need to figure out where pi over 2 is. Okay, this is 0, this is pi, so pi divided by 2 has got to be exactly in the middle. So pi over 2 is right here. At pi over 2, the sine value is 1, so at pi over 2, the y value is 1. Okay, now I'm going to go back to pi. At pi, the sine of pi is 0. I'm going to go to 3 pi over 2. Okay, the sine of 3 pi over 2 is negative 1. Where is 3 pi over 2? It's exactly between pi and 2 pi, so it's got to be in the middle. What was it, negative 1? Okay, now I go to 2 pi. 2 pi is not my unit circle, but 2 pi is going back to 0. So now I'm back at 0 again. Okay, now sine is periodic, so it keeps repeating itself. So I see this little pattern here. I'm going to kind of repeat this pattern. So this was 0, then it goes back up to 1 in 2 spaces. 1, 2, back up to 1. Okay, if I keep going around the circle, it goes back to 0, negative 1. And then 4 pi goes back to 0 again, and that's because if I do 2 pi plus 2 pi, I get 4 pi. Okay, sine is periodic. It goes forever in both directions because I can keep going around the unit circle. And it should curve because it's a curve. So I'm going to try to curve this graph. Try not to zigzag. Okay, this is the graph of sine. I'm putting an arrow in both directions because I can continue forever and ever following this pattern. Okay, now here's some verbs. Okay, amplitude is how high up and down it goes from the midline. So this is the middle of the graph. It goes up 1, it goes down 1, it goes up 1, it goes down 1, so the amplitude is 1. The amplitude is also like the stretch. There's no stretch on this, so it's going to stay 1. The period is how long it takes to repeat its cycle of graph. So if I look at sine, it starts at 0, goes up 1, 0, down 1, 0, and then it does it again. It goes up 1, 0, down 1, 0. And it follows the same pattern again. So this first little loop from here to here, the amount of time it takes to do one pattern is considered a period. So the period is 2 pi. And that's how long it takes to do this pattern. And then you repeat it, and then I could repeat it again. It's also the size of the unit circle, which kind of makes sense. Okay, now we're going to graph different kinds of sine x, and we're going to use the same pattern, but some of them are going to have a vertical stretch, which will only change the amplitude. Okay, so I haven't graphed it yet, but I can tell what the amplitude is going to be. Normally the amplitude's 1. Since there is a 3 in front, my amplitude's going to be 3. I haven't graphed it, but the period should be 2 pi because that's how long it takes me to go around the unit circle. Okay, now I'm going to graph it similarly to how I did the first one. So if I do the sine of 0, it starts at 0. Okay, then I go to pi over 2, which is between 0 and pi. Okay, and then it goes up to 1, but it's a vertical stretch of 3, or it has an amplitude of 3. So instead of going up to 1, I'm going to go up 3. When I get to pi, the sine is back to 0. When I get to 3 pi over 2, it goes to negative 1, and that's between pi and 2 pi. But there's a stretch of 3, or the amplitude's 3, so it's actually going to go down 3. Okay, and then when I go to 2 pi, I go back to 0 because that's one period of the graph. Okay, so that's one period of my graph right there. Then it repeats again. So it went 0, up, 0, down, 0. So it's going to go 0, up, 0, down, 0 again. So between 2 pi and 3 pi, I'm going to go up. Then I go to 0. And then between 3 pi and 4 pi, I go back down 3. And I go back to 0. And then it repeats. Okay, so let me sketch this. It should look curvy. It's called a sinusoidal curve. Okay, so one period is when I went from here to here to here because I did 0 up, 0 down, 0, and then it just keeps 0 up, 0 down, 0 forever and ever and ever. Okay, let's do 4 sine x. Amplitude, 4. Period is still going to be 2 pi. It'll be 2 pi all day today. Okay, let's see if we can follow the pattern instead of using the unit circle every time. Otherwise, I can always use the unit circle. Okay, the unit circle said I went 0, up, 0, down, 0. Okay, so I'm going to go 0. In between, I go up. How far up do I go? 4, because the amplitude's 4. 0, up, back to 0. And I go down. How far down? 4, because the amplitude's 4. And then back to 0. Okay, this is one period of the graph. Here, I'm going to sketch the one period in. Okay, and then it repeats again. So what would I do? I go 0, up, 0, down, 0, and I keep hitting the pi's. So in between it goes up, hits the 0, in between it goes down, and then it goes back to the 0, and that's another period. Okay, but then it keeps going forever and ever and ever. So I'm going to do an arrow at the end. Boom, boom. Okay, one more sine graph. Okay, let's look at this. J of x equals negative 2 sine x. What's the amplitude? Okay, the amplitude is 2. The negative is telling me there's going to be a reflection. Okay, but the amplitude is always positive. It's just like your vertical stretch is always positive. The period's still 2 pi because we're going to stay in the period of 2 pi for a long time now. Okay, now what is this going to change? Normally I go 0, up, 0, down, 0. Since it's reflected, every time I go up, I'm going to go down instead. Okay, but I'm going to start at 0. Okay, and then between 0 and pi, I normally go up. But instead I'm going to go down because it's negative 2. So from here I'm going to go negative 2. Okay, and then we go back to 0. We hit the 0 at the pi. And then normally we go down next, but since I already went down, I have to go up because it is a reflection. The amplitude's 2 pi. Okay, that's one period. Okay, I'm going to continue the pattern, but I'm going to show you this is the first pattern, 2 pi. And now I continue. I went 0, down, 0, up, 0. Okay, so I'm back at 0, down, 0, up, 0. And my zeros should be catching those pi's. Okay, make your graph curved. And remember, this graph can go forever in both directions. Okay, next we're going to look at cosine. Okay, now for cosine, I'm going to use the unit circle again. Now the amplitude and period are going to be this, just like sine. So for amplitude, it's going to be 1 because there's no stretch. The period is going to be 2 pi because that's how long it takes me to go around the unit circle. And I'm going to draw the unit circle again. And I'm going to use the 4 corners to remind me how to start this. So if I go right 1, it's 1, 0, 0, 1, negative 1, 0, 0, negative 1. Okay, where are my locations? This is 0, pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2. And you've got to know those 4 points. Okay, now if I'm graphing cosine, now I'm looking at the x coordinates. So when I do the cosine of 0, the cosine of 0 is 1. So at cosine 0, or at 0, I am actually going to go up to the 1. Okay, now I go to pi over 2. The cosine of pi over 2 is 0. So at pi over 2, where's pi over 2 between 0 and pi? Now I'm going to hit the 0 here. Okay, when I get to pi, the cosine is negative 1. When I get to 3 pi over 2, the cosine is 0 again. Where's 3 pi over 2? It's between pi and 2 pi. So I'm hitting the 0 again. And then I go back to 2 pi, and I'm back up to 1. Okay, so for cosine, it's going to hit the 0 at all the over 2's. And then the pi's are going to be up or down. Okay, this is one period of the graph. It's going to keep following this pattern. So it was at 1. Now it's going to go to 0. and then it's going to go to -1, then it's going to go back to 0, and it's going to go back up to 1. Okay, this is 2 periods of the graph. Okay, I'll show you the first period. It should be curved, although it's a little harder to get it curved when we're used to drawing sine. Okay, the second period goes like this. And it keeps going forever and ever and ever, so I'm going to go ahead and put arrows at the ends. Arrow, arrow, and that one's fat for no reason. Okay, so cosine is very similar to sine, except for instead of starting at 0, it starts at 1. So it's 1, 0, down, 0, back up to 1. That's 1 period. Then it goes again, 0, down, 0, back up to 1, starts again. Okay, now we're just going to change the amplitude and maybe do a reflection. Okay, so for 4, g of x equals 2 cosine x. The amplitude is 2, because there's a stretch of 2. The period is 2 pi, because we're not going to mess with the period today. Okay, since we're doing cosine, the cosine graph starts at 1, but it's being stretched by 2. So instead of going up to 1, it's going to go up to 2, starting at my amplitude. So this is going to start at 2. Okay, when I get to pi over 2, it goes to 0. When I go to pi, it's -1, but it's stretched by 2, so it's going to go to 2, -2. When I get to 3 pi over 2, we're back to 0. And then 2 pi is back where I started from, which is 1, but it's really 2 because of the stretch. Okay, this is my pattern. I did 1 period now. So it went 2, 0, -2, 0, 2. Okay, I'm going to keep going. So 2, 0, -2, 0, 2. And once you can't catch the pattern, you can just start graphing it. 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. And then just glance. It's hitting all the zeros at the over 2s. It's hitting these at the pi's. So it should look like it's correct. Okay, let me sketch it. It should look curved, even though it doesn't start in the middle of the curve. Okay, and it does keep going, and I pretend like it's going to keep going in the correct direction. It just keeps going up and down because it's a sinusoid. No, it's a cosine curve. Okay, h of x equals 3 cosine x. Amplitude is 3. Period is 2 pi. Okay, we're going to follow the same pattern. Cosine starts high. So my amplitude's 3, so it's going to start at the 3. Then where does it go? Hits the 0. Then it goes down. Hits the 0, back up to 3. That's 1 period. So I started, hit all my points, got back up to 3. That's my first period. Then I'm going to follow the pattern again. 3, 0, down, 0, up. So 3, 0, down, 0, up. And if your graph gets off, you should notice, because it'll start to look not even. Okay, and even though sometimes it's hard with these tall ones, we're gonna make it look curvy and not like a zigzag, because it's a curve. If we plotted more points, we would get a better curve. Okay, last one. What's the amplitude? The amplitude's 1. That weird negative is a reflection, but the amplitude is always positive, just like your stretches. Okay. Now cosine normally starts up, but since this is a negative, it's going to go down 1, so it's going to be reflected. Okay, and then it hits the 0. And then since I already went down, it has to go up now. And then it goes back down to 0, and then I end where I started from. So this is 1 period. Now I repeat, down, 0, up, 0, down. So down, 0, up, 0, down. And even though it's short, we try to make it curve, and we pretend like it's curving more. So it's it would go up if I continued it on the left. Okay, and it should curve back up if I continued it. Okay, and then that's the graph of cosine.